An $800,000 house in Canada might require close to $2 million dollars to leave your bank account over the next 25 years. And no, I'm not saying the house itself costs $2 million. dollars. I'm talking about everything that comes with owning it. The mortgage, mortgage interest, property tax, insurance, utilities, maintenance, closing costs, repairs, and a few expenses that are surprisingly easy to forget when you're looking at the listing price. Some of that money builds equity in your home, but a lot of it simply becomes the cost of owning it. Now, before you think, is this another video telling me not to buy a house? No, not at all, because I completely understand why people want to own a home. Honestly, I do too. When I first started looking at houses, I couldn't find one place that showed me the complete monthly cost of owning a home. One calculator showed the mortgage, another estimated property tax, a different website talked about closing costs. Everything was scattered, so I decided to put everything together. I opened Excel, and I started writing down every single dollar that buying this house would actually require. House price, down payment, mortgage insurance, property tax, home insurance, utilities, maintenance, closing costs, furniture, and the other expenses that come with owning the house. So I decided to put everything into one calculation. I built a spreadsheet that follows the cost of an $800,000 house from the day you buy it, all the way through 25 years of ownership. So if you're planning to buy a house, you can download it, plug in your own numbers, and follow along as we go through the calculation, because I don't want you to rely on my assumptions. I want you to understand your situation, the amount you actually need on the day you buy the house, the amount leaving your bank account every month, and the expenses that will eventually show up even if they don't arrive as a monthly bill. And that's when something interesting happens. That $800,000 house starts becoming a very different number. For a lot of us, buying a house isn't just about real estate. It's about finally feeling settled. It's about having a place that's yours. A place where you don't have to wonder whether your landlord is going to sell the property next year. A place where you can finally say, I'm home. And Ben and Cherry, a couple living in Canada, are getting very close to doing exactly that. They've been renting for the last few years. And during that time, they've been saving for one major goal: their first home. Sometimes that meant saying no to a weekend trip. Sometimes it meant keeping the same phone for another year. Sometimes it simply meant looking at something they wanted and saying, maybe next year. Not because they couldn't buy it, because they wanted something bigger, a home of their own. Finally, after years of saving, they've managed to put together $80,000. They start looking around, and then they find it. A detached house in their preferred location, listed for $800,000. The location works. The commute isn't bad. The neighborhood feels quiet and nice. And for the first time, it actually feels possible. On the drive back home, they're already talking about furniture locations and what they do with the backyard. Maybe some modifications, which can be made later on. Honestly, that's exactly what most of us would be talking about, because this is exciting. Then later that evening, Ben opens a mortgage calculator. House price, $800,000. Down payment, 10%. Mortgage rate, 4.5%. 25-year amortization. A few seconds later, the calculator gives him a number. About $4,100 every month. And just like that, they both are doing exactly the same calculation most Canadians do. Can we afford this? They look at their salaries, their monthly expenses. Maybe they cut back on a few things. Maybe they skip one vacation every year. In the end, they say, this house will fit in our budget. I probably would have stopped there too. Because that's exactly how most of us think. If the monthly payment fits, we assume the house fits too. After all, that's what almost every mortgage calculator shows us. One number, one monthly payment, and somehow our brain quietly turns that into the total cost of owning the house. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like something wasn't adding up. Everybody seemed to be talking about the mortgage payment, but almost nobody was talking about everything else: the property tax, insurance, utilities, maintenance, closing costs, furniture, repairs, and unexpected problems. And honestly, maybe I also could have just accepted it. I also could have looked at that mortgage payment, told myself, yeah, I think we can afford this, and moved on. But then I did something I usually do before any big financial decision. I slowed down and overthought every aspect, because some decisions are worth overthinking. Let's go back to Ben and Cherry, who are currently in the process of finalizing their dream house. After the down payment, before Ben and Cherry even get the keys, the bank tells them something they weren't expecting. Since you're putting down less than 20%, your mortgage needs to be insured. Ben pauses. Insured? I'm already buying the house. Why do I need insurance on the mortgage too? And honestly, that's the first time many Canadians ever hear about CMHC insurance. So here's what it is. CMHC is Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. When you put down less than 20% on a home in Canada, your lender usually requires mortgage default insurance. The insurance doesn't protect you. It protects the lender in case the borrower can't repay the mortgage. It sounds a little strange at first, because you're paying for an insurance policy that mainly protects someone else. But that's simply how insured mortgages work in Canada. The good news is, you usually don't pay that premium upfront. Instead, it's added to your mortgage, which also means you're paying interest on it for the next 25 years. For Ben and Cherry, that premium comes to roughly $22,000. So before they've even received the keys, their mortgage quietly grows. Nothing has changed about the house, but suddenly, they owe even more than they expected. And that's just the first surprise. Then comes property tax. Now this one catches people off guard for a different reason. Because even after you finished paying off your mortgage someday, property tax doesn't disappear. As long as you own the home, it continues. Think of it as your contribution toward local services like roads, parks, schools, libraries, emergency services, and snow removal. The exact amount depends on where you live and the assessed value of your home. For this example, let's assume it's about 1% of the home's value each year. For an $800,000 home, that's $8,000 every year, or about $660 every month. Then comes home insurance. This one is different from mortgage insurance. Mortgage insurance protects the lender. Home insurance protects your home. If there's a fire or a flood that's covered under your policy, or someone gets injured on your property, this is the insurance that helps protect you financially. For our example, let's assume around $180 per month. Not a huge number by itself. But remember, we're not looking at one expense. We're looking at everything together. Then, utilities. And this is one of those expenses people often underestimate before they move into a house. Electricity, natural gas, water, maybe a little more heating in winter, a little more air conditioning in summer. The larger the home, the more it generally costs to keep it comfortable. Let's use a reasonable estimate of about $450 every month. Now Ben looks back at the spreadsheet. The monthly number has already grown quite a bit, but we're still not done, because houses need maintenance, and this is probably one of the easiest costs to ignore. Nothing breaks until it does. The roof doesn't ask for permission. Neither does the furnace, or the water heater, or the driveway, or the fence after a windy winter. Some years, you might spend almost nothing. Another year, you could suddenly be replacing an appliance that costs a few $1,000s. That's why many financial planners suggest setting aside around 1% of the home's value every year for maintenance. This part you may not spend every year, but because eventually the house will ask for it. For an $800,000 home, that's about $8,000 every year, or roughly $660 every month. Now pause for a second. Let's add up everything we've talked about so far. The mortgage, property tax, home insurance, utilities, maintenance. The monthly cost is no longer just the mortgage payment. It's already more than $6,000. every single month. And remember, even before Ben moved in, there's one more group of expenses waiting for them. Closing costs. This isn't one bill. It's a collection of smaller costs that all show up at the same time. The first one, land transfer tax. This is a tax you pay to the government when ownership of the property is transferred to you. The amount depends on where you buy and the price of the home. Since Ben and Cherry are buying an $800,000 home in Ontario, we're assuming about $12,500 after applying the available first-time homebuyer rebates. Then there are legal fees, because buying a house isn't as simple as exchanging money for keys. A real estate lawyer reviews the paperwork, registers the property in your name, and makes sure the funds are transferred properly. We've assumed about $2,000 for legal fees. You'll also hear about something called title insurance. It's usually a one-time purchase that protects you from certain ownership or title-related issues that might come up after you buy the property. In many cases, your lawyer arranges it during closing. We've included around $500 for that. Then comes the home inspection. Think of it as hiring someone to look for problems before you officially buy the house. Things like roofing issues, foundation cracks, plumbing, electrical, heating, the kinds of problems that could cost thousands of dollars later. We've assumed this, about $600, and of course, moving everything you own from one place to another. Hiring a moving truck, buying boxes, maybe taking a day off work. We've budgeted another $2,000 for that. Individually, none of these sound too much. None of them make you think, maybe I shouldn't buy the house. But together, they absolutely do. Because before Ben and Cherry even spend their first day in their new home, they've already spent more than $97,000. And that's before buying a sofa, bed, a dining table, curtains, a lawnmower, or even unpacking the first moving box. So now let's put everything together. For Ben and Cherry's $800,000 home, they needed to bring more than $97,000 on the closing day. That's their down payment, plus all the closing costs we talked about. Now, you might notice that I haven't included furniture in that number. And that's intentional, because furniture is personal. Some people move into a house with everything they already own. Others might spend a few $1,000s. Some might spend $20,000 or $30,000. In the calculator I've linked below, I've included $10,000 as a starting point. But you can change that to whatever makes sense for your situation. Then comes the monthly ownership cost, which we calculated earlier. That's about $6,000 every single month, because that's what it actually costs to own and maintain this home. This is the moment that really changed how I thought about buying a house. Because when people ask, how much house can you afford? Most of us immediately think about the mortgage. But maybe the better question is, can I actually afford everything that comes with owning it? Because the mortgage wasn't the whole story. It was only the beginning. If Ben and Cherry make those payments over the next 25 years, they'll pay well over $1.9 million in total. Now, before anyone says, wait, are you telling me this $800,000 house costs more than $1.9 million? No, not exactly. A large portion of those mortgage payments is paying back the money they borrowed. That money becomes equity in the home. The rest goes toward the costs that come with owning a house. So the point isn't that an $800,000 house somehow magically turns into a $1.9 million house. The point is that over 25 years, that's roughly how much cash leaves your bank account to buy, finance, and own it. And I think those are two very different ways of looking at the same decision. Because this video was never about convincing you not to buy a house. I love the idea of owning a home. For many people, it's a place to build memories, raise a family, feel a sense of stability, and for many, it can also become a great long-term investment. This video wasn't trying to answer whether buying a house is better than renting or not. It was trying to answer something much simpler. What does owning a house actually cost? Because before we decide whether something is worth buying, we should first understand how much we're really paying for it. So, if you're thinking about buying a house, I'd really encourage you to download the calculator from the description and try your own numbers. because I don't want you to make decisions based on Ben and Cherry's numbers. I want you to understand yours. Another question that kept bothering me while I was building this calculator: what if Ben and Cherry didn't buy the house? What if they invested that $97,000 instead? What if they kept renting a similar home and invested the difference every month? Would they actually end up with more wealth? Or would buying the house still come out ahead? I sat down and built another spreadsheet to answer exactly that question, and the answer genuinely surprised me. So that's what we'll overthink in the next video. If this video helped you look at home ownership a little differently, consider sharing it with someone who's thinking about buying their first home. You might save them from overlooking a cost they didn't even know existed. And if you'd like to see what happens when we compare buying a house with investing that same money instead, subscribe, because that's the next decision we're going to overthink. Until then, thanks for watching.